Hello everyone, welcome to Fuse Room. I'm Alberto. In this video we're going to talk about how gain can give you sound. So in the digital domain we know that unless you crush your bits and end them and you have no more bits available, a plus 6 dBFS is just gonna be a louder version of the same waveform. And there's not really gonna be a sound. I know there's exceptions, there might be variables involved, but generally that's not the case. In the analog domain, however, if you do a plus 6 through an input stage of a compressor or the output stage of the same compressor, you're gonna have a different sound than what the source has and a different sound between these two types of plus 6. So we're gonna explore how analog does it with one example for all, and we're gonna talk about some plugins that might give you this added benefit of sort of like gain staging the analog way in the digital domain. So we're gonna use my Comp.One by Rockruepel. This is number 33 of 50 in the world. I'm very lucky to have one, and it's a vari compressor that it's quite clean and very versatile for mastering. We're gonna use it to check what happens when we start giving gain to the unit, and then we're gonna use some plugins to do that. So the first thing we're gonna do is check the analog equipment. So here we are sending a signal through my chain from the DA and then back into an AD. And we can see both channels, left and right. And as you can see, things are pretty flat. They're not absolutely flat because that thing doesn't exist, but we can see that down to 5 Hertz, things start getting shaved down, and the same happens after 20K. This is a 44.1 session. I don't want to go higher than that. There's no reason for our tests. And what happens now is with the push of a button, I'm gonna engage my compressor, the Comp.One, in the circuit. So now, because of how it's calibrated or whatever, you see how things changed. Now we're actively seeing how the original signal is actually transforming into, right? So if I take one of the two channels and just gain it up in the output stage, we're gonna see that, in this case it's the pink one, we are obviously going up in the graph, and we're also sort of becoming just a tad more unstable. And look what happens. There's actually, the frequency response is changing a lot. We're actually not clipping the converters still that I can see, but there's quite a different, still similar, I have to say. There's units that are much more colored, and this is not supposed to be this much colored. So I was expecting this, good to see it, but there's definitely a bit more than there is in the other channel. This was by cranking up the output stage while leaving the input at 5, which is like halfway through. Now we're gonna do the same thing with the input stage. So we're still gonna go up, but we're gonna go up with the in. So now I'm still taking the right channel, and look what happens. Now I am not compressing at all. This compressor has a function that was asked by a lot of beta testers, which is the amp only mode. So there's no compression at all. We're using this as an amplifier, and it's a really good one. And for how subtle it is, you can see that it actually imparts quite a sound while going through just the amplifiers. We're going through the unit, and input and output change things a lot. So if I were to go up with the left channel, which is the green-blue one, you can see that gain staging up through the output stage is never gonna give us the same behavior that the violet curve has, which is the right channel. So that tells us what happens when we send a signal that involves the whole frequency spectrum, and we saw it react to the different changes that I had in the input and output staging. Now let's do one more test. Let's see if we send a 1 kilohertz sine wave. What happens when the sine wave goes through the compressor? So right now you're seeing just the blind loop with no compressor in. You can see the noise being different between the channels, of course, because nothing's equal in the real world that we live in. And we are down to minus 150 dB. So you can see the violet 1 kilohertz spike in the middle, and you can see there's kind of a 2K harmonic there. I would say. It's like, you can see it because it's already at minus 125, but it's there. If we engage the compressor with the channels both at approximately 5 in and out, look at what happens. There's definitely a higher density of harmonic content that this compressor generates at 5 in, 5 out, with just a sine wave at 1 kilohertz going through it. Now, what happens if we take maybe the right channel and we crank the output up, for example? If we crank it up, we see a lot more signal, obviously. What happens if we compensate with the output? We're going to get a different amount of harmonics. What happens if we crank the input and we lower the output? You see how many more information in the harmonic content that the compressor added are there. So remember, this was the original. So this is what happens in analog. We're gain staging things, we're also changing the sound. So the more we climb the ladder up of the bits of loudness or whatever happens in digital, we quite never get this kind of behavior, which is non-linear, which is the beautiful part and the unpredictable part of analog. And now what we're going to do is we're going to try and see if there's plugins that can kind of emulate this behavior. They're going to get different results, but what I want to see is there anything that we can use to emulate the old ways of just adding gain and gaining sound, which is kind of a cool way to say it. Let's see it. This one is Ultramarine4 by Acustica Audio. It's meant to be a compressor that emulates, the interface is pretty clear on it, a Fairchild. Whether it's a 670 or a 660, I'm leaning towards the 70 because it says model A-70, so that's a hint. What we're gonna do is we're gonna link the channels for our convenience, and we're gonna take a look at what the plugin does with and without. So here, with the input trim at 0, the output trim at 0 on the right side, we're pretty much, getting into the plugin and getting out with no gain added or removed. All right, now let's see what happens if we work the input trim and output gain of this plugin with some of the functions that Acustica offers. So with the preamplifier turned off, the modeling, the sampling, the snapshot of the behavior of this preamplifier is not being used in the signal processing. So what happens if I take the right channel and I bring it up 6? It doesn't look exactly the same, but it's pretty close to the original. So what happens if I go +6, but engage the preamplifier? It looks pretty similar, but the real magic happens when we turn the preamplifier modeling on and then we trim with the input going up, for example. So if I take a +6, now I can see that the plugin is compensating, because that's just how they wrote it. It's compensating the gain. It's not what's happening on my compressor. The gain is actually getting trimmed before and after the input stage. So that's kind of cool and convenient in this case, because I'm not getting any difference in gain, but I'm getting the sound difference that I'm after. So you can see how the left channel is still unchanged and the right one has changed completely. If I disengage the pre, then the two channels are back to being equal, even if the input trim for the right channel stays at what seems to be +12. It only works, it's huge magic, when the preamplifier modeling is on. Then what happens if I crank this +6 and this +6? So the output stage seems to be definitely more linear. I don't want to say it is linear because I don't have, the resolution or the numbers to just be mathematically, perfect in my opinions, but it looks like it's a cleaner stage, way cleaner than what I was getting with the Comp.One. But the whole magic thing happens in the input trim with the preamplifier on. All right, so now let's check how the harmonic content is modified by this plugin. We engage the pre, and we can already see something that we couldn't really see before, that even if it's completely flat, the harmonic content changes quite considerably. I mean, we have a minus 133 for the 3 kilohertz, and we jump to a minus 96. So there's quite a lot of harmonics. Is it the same as my Comp.One? Of course not. They're two different units, they sound different. What happens if we start pushing the input? Remember, because it's compensated, the funny thing is that we don't even have to just gain stage things. The plugin is doing that for us while still taking into account the added input trim. So you can see that the left channel is still down there, but the right channel is actually increasing quite a lot, and we're getting a lot of harmonics now. They're almost on par with the fundamental, which is a lot, but we're at plus 24. That was to be expected. Now what happens if we keep the pre on and then we go up with the output stage? Maybe we'll change the harmonic content, maybe it won't. Let's see. And I would say that it does. It doesn't seem to be exactly linear, and although it seems to be cleaner than what the input does, which again is what happened with the analog unit. So that's the behavior we would expect. All right, now for an actual comparison. Let's take a chorus of a song I wrote and run it through the Rockruepel Comp.One, capture it, and compare it against the Ultramarine4. We're gonna get +6 from both units, and we're gonna compensate the gain afterwards so that we don't get fooled by loudness. We are then gonna draw our conclusions in our mind. Maybe you like one better, maybe you like the other one better. I don't know. Let me know as usual, because I'm always interested in hearing what you think about that. Let's start. All right, so this concludes the video. I hope it was useful to you and makes your music, as usual, better than it already is. Hit me up if you have any questions, as usual. See you next time. Ciao.